Today's episode is sponsored by the Thumb Gummy, a simple but powerful teaching aid designed for band students and their teachers. If you've ever taught beginners or even students a few years in who still struggle with their hand position, you know how much time can be lost with the same reminders over and over again. Thumb Gummy was created to fix that problem. It gives students a gentle guide for where their hands should go so they play more comfortably and with better technique. That means fewer bad habits, less frustration, and more progress in every rehearsal. Teachers tell us they spend less time correcting posture and more time actually teaching music. And students gain confidence because their instrument feels easier to play. Thumb Gummy is trusted by educators across the country, and it's available for trumpet, trombone, clarinet, and more. To learn more or find a local music store that carries it, visit thumbgummy.com. My good friend Trent Austin started Austin Custom Brass so many years ago. You can call them at 816-410-0826. They ship all over the world. They have a shop in Kansas City, Missouri, and they really are an amazing sponsor of this podcast. They do trumpets, trombones, euphoniums, tubas, mouthpieces, and more, all the way from the beginner to the professional. Austin Custom Brass has worked with thousands of brass players from around the world, and you can check them out on www.austincustombrass.biz. Welcome back to the Growing Band Director Podcast. This is episode number 294. I'm here with Sally Wagner. Sally, how are you?
I'm well, thanks. How are you this morning, Kyle?
Beautiful. Thank you. I'm wonderful. Thanks for asking. It's great to meet you today. For people who don't know Sally, Sally taught public school for 40 years, 34 as a director of bands at Eleanor Roosevelt High School in Maryland. I've heard amazing things about you and that you've taught at every single level and choir, band, orchestra, and general music and all the things. So happy to learn from you today. We're going to be kind of working off out of a book that people can see on the episode cover as well, called The Pursuit of Excellence, a Band Director's Guide to Success, that Sally wrote. We're going to be covering some of the chapters. But before we do that, do you have any sort of thoughts on, as you look back on your career of those 34 years, 40 years, what kind of comes to your mind?
Something I always say is I never worked a day in my life. Now, as a band director, you know that that's not true. But what I mean by that is I loved every minute of what I did. The kids were a challenge. Sometimes they were more of a challenge than other times, but I really enjoyed teaching music to high school students. I always said, give me a room full of teenagers any day, but if you have one adult, stay in the room with me. It's hard work. It's not something that one should go in a field that one should go into lightly. It's going to take all of your time. I did raise twins, which was an interesting challenge of itself. So it was not all consuming, but teaching music and reaching every student is a lot of work. And somewhere along the line, I felt like I was letting them down if I didn't plant the seeds of lifetime enjoyment of music. So that was my goal. And the fact that I'm still in touch with so many of my alums, I think at least in some respect, I reached part of that goal.
I love that you mentioned that. I've asked that to other teachers who are retired, and sometimes their answers, they usually revolve around something about the relationships they built with the people as they look back on it.
Yeah.
One of the things I wanted to point out from the end of your book that's not in the chapters we're going to cover today is that you said the single most important lesson that you learned in your teaching was that it's all about the work ethic.
Like I said, it's not an easy job, but it's a very rewarding job. There's so much that needs to be done. If you're not an organized, I had a sign over my desk that said I'm too busy to be organized. And you could look at my desk and wonder how I could find anything, but I knew about how far down it was. And if it was on colored paper, I knew what I was looking for. I had a big responsibility. There were 4 bands that met every day. There was an after-school jazz band, an after-school Dixieland combo, an after-school flute choir, an after-school clarinet choir. Leading into Solo and Ensemble Festival, there were, maybe a trombone quartet or a woodwind quintet or a brass quintet, and a lot of folks with duets. And each of those students requires a little bit of your time. And one of the ways that I used to do that, I used to stand at the door when they came in so I could greet each student. But I think that it's not a job that ends at 3:30 or whenever school gets out. I was one of two first teachers there. The head of the math department and I would compete for the prime parking space. But one of the first teachers there, and often one of the last teachers to leave. And I think not only is it a time commitment, there's stuff going on at home. Once my kids were in bed, I was doing stuff for school. In the summer, I was listening to the new music so that I knew what I was going to purchase for the new year. Um, it's ongoing. It has to be a passion. I think that's the key. It has to be a passion, not just a job.
Excelsior Music Publishing is proud to sponsor the Growing Band Director podcast with a roster of imaginative composers, including composers who have been featured on this podcast, such as Carol Britton Chambers, Laura Estes, and Tyler Arcari. Excelsior Music Publishing provides new music for concert band, jazz ensemble, solo and ensemble, as well as books and resources for all levels and occasions, including a large and festive selection of music for your fall, holiday, and Christmas concerts. Find your perfect next piece at excelsiamusic.com. That's EXCELCIA music.com. You've heard me talk about the wonderful Tuner Caddy product. Now introducing the Tuner Caddy Tuner TCT60M. Is a chromatic tuner that transposes for instruments in F, C, B flat, and E flat. Has a 6-foot clip-on microphone so they can tune from their seat, a built-in metronome to keep your tempos honest, and a bright, easy-to-read display so even the trumpet section can't miss it. Pair it with the Tuner Caddy and you have the Tuner Caddy system, a place for everything and everything in its place. So as we dive into a few of the chapters of the book, again, I'll say it again for people who have not bought it. I've enjoyed what I've read of it. The Pursuit of Excellence: A Band Director's Guide to Success is at Meredith Music Publishing.
GIA has bought Meredith Music, so it's now handled by GIA.
I've learned already. Love it. So we're going to dive in first to chapter 12. Well, before we do, I'll say we were talking about like what we could discuss in this podcast, right? I was just looking to learn from you, and you're someone who it's been so hard to nail down what we're going to talk about because like a lot of people have one thing or two things, and you just seem to have had so many experiences and so many presentations and books and all that stuff everywhere that honestly, we could just do a whole series of 100 podcasts just with you. So we'll see on follow-up. But for today, we're gonna hit on these chapters. So
Okay.
First, we're gonna start with chapter 12. What led you to kind of get into discussing this? It's called Motivation, Your Best Feeder System.
It's a series of 3 clinics that I gave, probably 30 years ago, 35 years ago at a state conference. And the first one was getting students into your class. I was in an unusual teaching situation. We had, it was a school with about between 2,700 and 3,300 students, and a third of the population, 750 kids each year, were tested into an academic accelerated program in science and technology. So there were those kids, and then it was a regular high school also in there. The science and tech kids had a very restricted schedule, but those are the kids you want in your ensemble too. You know, the other kids had more time, more electives, etc. So my goal, because these kids came from up to 27 different feeder schools, my goal was to try to have FaceTime with as many of them as I could. As a 9th grader in junior high school, I decided not to continue in band in high school. And because I really liked my junior high band director, and I didn't know the high school band director, but I knew he couldn't possibly be as funny as my junior high band, you know. Well, I guess there were several of us in that situation, because the high school band director came over with the band, played an assembly, and the euphonium player from the band came and talked to me specifically about how he was looking forward to me being in the section next year. And the band director met me, and I got to see him, and he became a human, not just a name. And I obviously did continue in band the next year. So I felt like FaceTime with incoming students, potential students, was important. So we would do what we could to interact with those kids. We would play assemblies. we played assemblies for the elementary kids who were just choosing whether they wanted to be in band at all and what instrument they wanted, so that the elementary kids saw me and then some of the middle school kids saw me. We did a fall spectacular where on Tuesday night, it was a different night for each part of the department, but on Tuesday night, 4 elementary bands, 2 middle school bands, and one of my bands gave a concert, no rehearsal. It was a mass band thing. They learned their pieces and we put them all together so that kids at all ages could see me, could see my students, could see that the band was okay, you know, that it was something they wanted to do. And so getting students into your program is a challenge. I know a lot of people who include the junior high or the middle school kids in a halftime show or in a concert, to create that bond. The elementary teachers do such an amazing job. They want the kids to continue. Middle schools have to reach out to those elementary schools and make themselves known. Volunteer at elementary solo and ensemble. Let the kids see you, that you don't have horns or fangs, and that it might be something fun to do when they get to the point where they make that decision. So getting the kids into your program is a really big thing. The second, yeah, and the teachers along all different levels need to cooperate. There's no place for the ivory tower. Just because you're the high school director doesn't mean you're anybody. In fact, I always thought I'd sort of semi-retire to teach elementary school, and then I realized how hard those people work. No way was I going to do that. You have to kind of sell your product, but first you have to have a product to sell. You have to make sure that there's a quality to your program that students are going to want to be a part of. Kids today have so many choices, and what they want to be is successful, and what their parents want them to be is successful. So if you can offer a successful program for them to participate in, you're going to get people in there. And then you have to, like I said, you have to cooperate with all the directors at different levels. The second session was on keeping them there year after year. And that can be challenging. You have to know your master schedule. You have to know the conflicts that might arise. You have to know which kids are struggling because mom wants them to take band, but they really want to take art. And what can you do to help them really engage in band? By being consistent, I think is a really big help. That's a hard thing to do because every day is a little different, but being consistent and being fair, being willing to work out those schedule problems, and keeping the program interesting. If you're playing the same pieces every year for the holiday assembly, that's one thing. But if you're playing the same pieces for assessment every 3 years, that's problematic. You gotta keep the variety going. And then I like it. I liked making band prestigious and making it. We had the queen or the king of band. It was a figurehead. They had no power, but we had officers. And I didn't have marching band at my school because of the science and tech program. So I had to create that feeling of esprit de corps in a different way. I had awards. I had officers. We always, the sports teams say, "Oh, we beat such and such over the weekend." Well, if the kids made county band, I had their names read on the announcement. Announced the real accomplishments, over the intercom so that the teachers know. And the third session was on providing a memorable music experience while they're there, and that all kind of ties together. You have to challenge them, but allow them to succeed.
Yeah, I love that. So if I were to summarize number one, I'd basically call it like be an active recruiter. Don't assume students are coming to you. Find every way you can to bring your students down to younger groups. The second part, to me, keeping them there is number one. Yes, it's about you as a person, but it's about your programming. Because if your programming is at a good level, they will be confident musicians. They will feel the love of being there. They'll want to be there. If the music is far too hard or far too easy, that's going to be tough for sure. And then the final part you were mentioning, what are some ways that you can make it really memorable for students?
Well, as you said, choosing the appropriate music. I think one of the biggest faults that I find when I listen to other bands is intonation just hasn't been dealt with. And as a director, you need to deal with it. It's not going to go away. Every band deals with it. Deal with that. That makes a big difference. Um, Understanding what motivates today's students, and not that you have to play pop music all the time or program computer game music, but you need to make references to it at least. Your standards of learning. My standards were always going up. If the kids achieved, I raised the bar. You have to improve yourself. You can't stagnate because the kids will realize that it's the same old, same old. How do you keep doing it day after day after day? You energize. And I think probably the drama classes I took in undergraduate school helped with that. There's a little book by Karen J. Pine. It's called Mind What You Wear. She is a British psychologist who has done research in clothed cognition. And her research shows that it absolutely affects how you teach and how your students learn based on how you are dressed, how you present yourself. So cargo shorts and a t-shirt from a rock concert and Tiva sandals don't make it. The kids are going to look at you and have a very relaxed attitude toward what you're teaching. The days that I felt really crappy, I tried to get up and get a little extra dressed, a little extra time to make sure that I looked better than I felt. And I think that what you wear, jeans are a very relaxed attitude in my book. When we traveled, kids were never allowed to wear blue jeans, and we never had any problem. But Karen J. Pine, Mind What You Wear, a little read, well worth it.
I love that. When you go back and talk about intonation, when we talk about being in tune, there's a word that comes before that, right? That I think a lot of people don't spend as much time on as they should.
Yes.
Being in tone, right? Having the
Yeah,
correct tone. Because in my estimation, if tone is great, a lot of intonation takes care of
that's
itself.
right.
You're going to have less to deal with.
That's right.
Yeah. And you mentioned this day after day. How do you stay energized? That's something I deal with. I think it's something everybody deals with. To me, and I've done episodes on this in the past, it's about score study. Because if I can get excited about the music we're doing,
Yes.
sometimes that's more exciting than period 3 on day 124, at the same time before lunch every day.
And sometimes you just have to lie. You just have to pretend. And that's why those drama classes came in useful.
Mm.
Because I could pretend to be loving what I was doing.
So the next two chapters that we're going to hit are all around assessment and
Yes.
adjudication, and as somebody who's been on both sides of it, I know you've adjudicated for a long time as well, but has also brought your band many places. We're going to hit chapter 23, which is your adjudication checklist.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is sort of like you go from 2 months out to 1 month out to 3 months out, 3 weeks out, and like a couple days before, like what are some things you should. So if people want this full like thing to look at, they need to buy the book. But let's start with sort of the big picture. Have you talked with people who maybe didn't take their band to Adjudicated Festival and maybe their reasonings for it, or?
No, we always had a few bands. We did everything on a county system, and we always had a few bands that canceled at the last minute, and it was the same bands year after year, and it made me wonder: did they overprogram?
They weren't ready.
Are the kids not bought? Have they not bought into the program? Or is it going to be only half the band was going to show up? Um, so I made this for myself because year after year, taking four bands to assessment, and they shared percussion. So I had to organize that. Who took it, who left it where, who picks it up, who brings it home. Um, I made it so that I was not a frazzled mess going into assessment. So, yeah, did I have my music picked 2 months before? That was the goal. Did I always reach the goal? Not always. I also know people who start their assessment music in the fall, but I I didn't. I didn't pick the music. We played probably each band probably played 8 to 10 pieces that I thought were appropriate. And some of the pieces just clicked. And I knew it was the right one to do. And rather than just look down the list of music and go, oh, that looks interesting. Let me give it a listen. Yeah, that sounds good. Let's learn this piece. I let the sound of the band choose the music. And evidently it worked because there are years and years and years where all four bands had superior ratings.
And so
So,
to be able to do that, you need a good you need an understanding of the repertoire to know, okay, if my
yes.
band is like this, here's some pieces I can do. Whereas my band is like this, then here's some other pieces I can do.
Well, if you have three horns in a low band, this piece works. If you only have two horns, this piece doesn't work. You have to know the instrumentation. And in a clinic later on, I never did this. It was all in my head until the last few years when I realized it was all starting to leave my head. I gave a clinic on creating a database. It with each piece. When did you play it? That was what I was forgetting. Golly, did we do that 3 years ago or was that 5 years ago? Um, when did we play it? What were some of the requirements? Did I have to have trumpets with a high C? Did I have to have a good low wind section, etc.? So picking the music is the biggest challenge, I think.
And any advice for people who are picking music that is quote unquote appropriate for festival versus music that maybe is still great music, but maybe and great for your kids, but maybe not for a festival?
We had a list that we had to choose from. And there were things on that list that probably shouldn't have been there. Um, if you're questioning whether it's appropriate, don't do it. Put it on the spring concert. I had a Sousa march that really it was in march form. It absolutely was. And I always did quirky marches. I never was a Sousa, got to do Sousa all the time. But I always did quirky marches, March of the Belgian Paratroop, stuff like that. And this one was called His Pleasure. And it was in march form, had an intro, a first strain, a second strain, a trio. I mean, but it was a ragtime piece by Sousa. And I thought that would be a real kick to do as the warm. And then I thought, it's not a march. It says ragtime something. It says something under the title. And I just decided we wouldn't do it. And we did it on the spring concert and it was fun. It was a hoot. But if there's a question, I wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
There are other opportunities.
And when you start looking at 6 weeks out, then you have some more nuts and bolts things. You say submit field trip request form if you need it. Submit, reserve the bus. My first marching band show ever, my first year, I never got a bus. So we went to leave where I had said to leave, and no bus showed up because I hadn't gotten the bus. I've been there and done that. And then borrow any missing percussion equipment. So basically, like get all the nuts and bolts detailed.
Yes.
Done 6 weeks ahead of time.
Well, I didn't want to be flustered that 2 weeks before assessment because the kids are already getting a little nervous because I'm getting intense. We're stopping and fixing little tiny things. So I don't want them to go into assessment tense. I want them to go in relaxed. I want me to go in relaxed because if I'm relaxed, they'll sense it. And by getting all of this done ahead of time, in the book, there's actually, because everybody's assessment requirements are different. Mm-hmm. I had to tell the cafeteria manager a month in advance that we were going to miss lunch periods and how many kids were involved so that she could figure out adjustments to the food, But in the book, there are blanks to fill in your own things that are particular to your program because not everything on my checklist is particular to everybody else's thing. But the point is, the most important thing is once you pick your music, start sight reading a little bit every day. If you've got sight reading as a graded part of your assessment, don't wait till the last week and say, oh, we have to sight read and pass out a bunch of pieces to sight read and you don't work on your pieces at all that last week. That makes no sense to me. So I had 9 classroom sets of method books. We called them textbooks, so they came out of a school budget.
Yeah.
And I would say grab the blue book, grab the green book, grab whatever, and we would just sight read lines. And I had a very specific sight reading routine that we did, so everybody was used to the routine, and then we'd read it down. And all of my bands sight read amazingly. It was sometimes I was looking, doing the circle. I'll find you. Keep going.
Hmm.
Especially
Can you summarize, in a sort of a short manner that warm up routine? The sight reading
yes,
routine.
it's a whole clinic, but yes, I can. We we did we fingered and spoke the parts. Like I talked through it, the big picture, and then we went back and we started at the beginning and they spoke the part and fingered it. Slides, valves, you know, and sang the part. Pitch didn't matter, but they would sing using dynamics, using articulations. I could talk over them. I could say, don't breathe here, and we could get the phrasing all set before it started. So when they said time, we'd already pretty much played the piece
Yeah.
before. And they were confident, they were calm. It was great.
And it gives you some feedback as well. If you could stop them and say, you know what their issue was, and you
Right.
might be able to help them with it ahead of time.
Could just talk over them because they're just singing quietly. I could say trumpets melody and they would bring it out,
Yeah.
or I'd say trombones too much.
You were also mentioning, wanting to make sure that at assessment time your students were relaxed, that your band was
Yes.
relaxed, right? I think that's great. So was there like an on-stage warm-up or something you might do to make sure they
We
were
were
relaxed, or
not,
was it just they were very prepared?
they were very prepared. We were not supposed to play anything on stage until the judges said go and we started our warm up. Um, I don't know how, but I usually said something ridiculously funny and they'd all laugh. And laughter is great for reducing tension. And I guess they knew it. If I
Mhm.
nothing else, I could make a funny face and go, here we go. And they would smile and laugh. And I felt good and they felt good.
I love that. Get them to laugh. That's awesome. Okay, so then 1 month prior, what are we doing?
Let me look.
Oh,
One, sorry, 1 month. Oh, if you haven't already done so, order your scores or borrow your scores. Make sure you've got them. I had to send home the permission slips, notify the faculty, notify the cafeteria manager, um, make sure that I had meal arrangements made. We did this during a school day. Assessment was held during a school day. It was
yeah.
usually a Friday and Saturday. So, and I would ask the woodwinds to make sure that they had two or three good reeds in rotation. So they didn't just have one reed that was broken in. And I asked the brass players to clean their lead pipes out because that could change pitch depending on when the last time they cleaned it was.
See, that's funny because I have a different experience with the cleaning out of the lead pipes. I always tell my kids, like, don't clean your horn the day of a concert
Oh,
because
no,
kids tend to want to do that. But if they clean out the lead pipe, in my, like, as a trumpet player, it feels very different.
sure, but we're a month out.
Oh, never mind.
That's why it's on there at that point.
You can tell I'm a trumpet player.
Yeah, well, we did instrument inspection every month, and I looked down those lead
Yeah.
pipes, and I told the kids I was allergic to tetanus antitoxin. They'd better been clean. So,
Great. So 2 weeks out, we got collect permission slips, numbering the scores on the measure, right?
and send your clothes to the dry cleaners. And then the other thing is ask the kids to make sure that their uniform parts still fit. And most of them are in the bottom of their hall locker. That shirt hasn't been washed, whatever. So get those home, get those clean, get them ready to go, and try on those pants because they're probably too short. And if you can let the hem out, that's fine. If it's not enough, we need to meet after school so you can get a new set of pants.
Yeah, it's
We
those
had,
logistics, those details, because
yes,
the detail orientation of all this other stuff means you have detail in your music, right? It's the
that's right.
same approach.
That's right.
Yeah. So as we're
So
getting closer, 1 week ahead of time.
1 week ahead of time, make sure the judges' scores are numbered. And here's the thing, check the last number of each score to make sure that the kids who numbered them all agreed and numbered them correctly, because there's time to redo it. I had a little spot in my office where I kept my stuff. It was my briefcase with my folders, with my scores, with my tuner, with my batons, with my extra bow ties, with two pairs of black socks. You know, everything that I needed to take to assessment, I had that, and I got that together. Um, I used to double check to make sure which instruments were being provided by the school where we were doing assessment and which ones I needed to bring, and make sure that that the percussionists were knew that they were responsible for getting certain instruments there, putting them in the storeroom afterwards, or bringing them back on the bus, whatever. All those logistical things. We get a little closer. Um, about 3 days out, I'd take care of anything that wasn't done. If there are any missing permission slips, if there are any missing kids with missing uniforms that we somehow didn't get to, I would polish my shoes. It was just kind of a thing to do that let me know I was almost there. And I saved that to almost the end because that was to let me know that when I was polishing, I knew I was set. Sent home final information to the parents, even though I'd sent it home before. I sent it again so
Yep.
that they knew which kids needed rides, when to pick them up, et cetera, et cetera. And then I was ready. And I would talk to the principal and tell him, explain to him what we were about to do. Because, you know, we assume a lot. If they weren't in band, they don't understand that the level of preparation exceeds sports preparation. I mean, sports do this every week. If they mess up one week, they can fix it the next week. We have this one shot to give a capsule of what we can do, and it's graded by professional musicians in our field. And the principal needs to understand that so that there's a little bit of excitement about what you're about to do and a little bit of appreciation for you and the kids. So,
I think that's so great. One of the logistical things that I always do a couple weeks ahead of time too is I'll check in with the host because in our assessment festival they provide piano as well, right? So
yes,
usually it's a grand piano. Once in a while it's a keyboard, but usually it's a grand piano. Well, I've had times where maybe that piano hadn't been used and the director wasn't using it and they didn't think to have it tuned.
tuned.
So there was one time
Yes,
we were doing something with like a big piano thing and I went up and played it before we went on stage and was like, oh, it sounds great. Well, it was all flat, but it was in tune with
yes,
itself. So we started the piece, and of course, that was 100% on me. So to this day, I'll check in a month ahead of time. Hey, you have the piano right? Has it been tuned? Whatever, because you might be the only band using piano. You don't
that's
know.
right. That's right.
So
Good
um,
point.
I
Good
also
point.
love one thing that you wrote on this. I can't seem to find it now, but that after the assessment festival, when
Yes,
you get home, that you thank the kids for
yes,
for all of their work towards making it happen.
yes, absolutely. Because, we take a lot of responsibility for assessment on ourselves to get them ready. But bottom line is they're doing the work. And so you have to thank them, and you have to I used to invite the principal down to congratulate them because that created kind of, the principal deals with the bad kids. He doesn't he doesn't get to see the good kids and the good things happening all the time. So that was a connection that they could make and announce it on the PA system the next morning during morning announcements. But I think a thing that's really important, nobody hires bad judges on purpose. The judge may not appreciate your interpretation. There may have been more things that judge heard than you did in your preparation, and it wasn't quite what you thought it was going to be, and you didn't get the grade you thought you were going to get. It's not the judge's fault. Don't say, "Oh, that's a bad judge. He doesn't know what he's talking about," or she's I don't know, whatever. But don't put the blame on the judge. Take a look at it and say, I don't agree with some of this, maybe, but I want you to hear it because this is what our adjudicator heard. And as someone who has sat on the other side of that table, it's amazing what judges hear that directors don't.
Absolutely. You have a fresh perspective.
Yes.
Yeah. So from that side of things, we're going to kind of turn into the last section that we're going to cover here from the book. This is chapter 24, and it's a number of things that adjudicators say over and over and over again, right? Things that
Yes.
you've probably said, okay, I've said this so many times into a tape. I need to write this down to make sure I cover it in a book sometime.
Right. So first thing that you get is always play more expressively. And it's like, well, what does that mean? So many directors think that following the dynamics and the articulations on the page is all you need to do to play expressively. But if that were true, let me give you an example. I'll just pick a funny place out of the book. Listening to other bands is helpful because one can listen more objectively. Oh, I picked a good chapter. Objective listeners are better able to, it's very flat. But we know when we read aloud to add expression, we don't have dynamics, we don't have phrases in text. We know instinctively how to shape the phrase, what words to emphasize. In music, we need to know instinctively what notes and what phrases to emphasize. And so comparing it to text seems to be something that folks can understand. Sometimes play more expressively means I'm hearing a crescendo, but I'm hearing trumpets leading the charge. And we need to crescendo that needs to be balanced at the beginning, it needs to be balanced in the middle, and it needs to be balanced at the end. And that means that loud instruments crescendo less, softer instruments crescendo more, so that we have that balance. And you check as you're rehearsing, you check the balance in the middle. Say, trombones, you're too loud already, save it, and make that expressiveness happen. So play more expressively
A,
can be
a
for
tip
adding.
a,
Sorry, go ahead.
a tip that I have is, you don't have to wait till your preparation for the concert to work on expressive playing,
Exactly.
right? Like even if they're missing notes and rhythms or you don't have all the dynamics, encourage your kids every day to create their own dynamics within the foundation of the dynamics that are there. Because
Exactly.
I just find that kids rarely choose a poor dynamic choice when they're trying to tell a story in a phrase, right? You might have to agree on something, but they're rarely going to make a bad choice very often.
Right.
So that needs to be part of the culture of your band. I mean, especially in a lyric piece, right?
Yes,
Especially in a lyric
exactly.
piece, like don't play the same dynamic three measures in a row.
Exactly. So playing more expressively is something that I was getting early in my career and I had to figure out how to do that. So figuring out, like you say, what you do and figuring out how to get your kids to feel comfortable, I guess. The second one, greater dynamic contrast needed. Bands play loud. Oh, we love it. Directors love to conduct loud. There's power in that baton, and it just you're unleashing it to the audience and all its glory. Bands don't do well playing softly. And so we hear everything pretty much from mezzo forte, mezzo piano, and above, but there's very rarely piano or pianissimo. And I struggled with this for years. And I finally asked my bands, all four of them, to play anything they wanted for 30 seconds every day as softly as they could with a good sound and in tune. And they all had tuners, so they knew. And it made after about 3 weeks of this, and we would do it I start the band, we'd do our warm up, and I'd say, play your 30 seconds as softly as possible, good sound. They would do it, 30 seconds would go by. I'd say, great, and we'd move on. And over time, they learned to play softly, and it was absolutely wonderful. The perfect example that I use when I'm doing guest conducting things is in a march. You get to the trio, and the first time through is usually soft. And we get there, and it's just the same dynamic everything else was. And I say, okay, start here, one on a part, one first flute, one second flute, one first, and play it. And they play it, and I say, softer, softer. And they get soft. And it's very transparent, and it's very shimmering, and it's a little cautious, but that's okay. And they play for a few, 16 bars or so. I say, great, now go back, two on a part, but no louder. and they play two on a part, and they hear that there's a fuller sound, but it's not louder. And so they really hear, they don't, I think students need to hear what soft sounds like. And so that's the example I use to get them to understand. Now we need to add everybody back in, but not increase the dynamic exponentially. Just it's just a thicker, fuller texture, a warmer texture, but not louder.
That's fantastic. It's all about the soft, and that also in turn will help your louds because you don't have to play as loud
That's
to
right.
sound strong. I love
That's
that.
right.
Yeah. And then the intonation of the inner parts.
We don't usually put our best players on second and third trumpet and second and third clarinet, and so there's that issue. And if you're dealing with intonation on a daily basis, those kids are getting better. But I think the problem is we don't tune the chords. I did a clinic on island hopping, and it was islands of intonation, and we would stop at every cadence point, and I would say, "Who's got the root?" And I would sing the root so they'd know because they can't tell by looking at their part necessarily. Play the root. Anybody who has this note, play this note and make sure that note's in tune. All right, stop. Anybody who has the fifth of the chord, this note, this note, this note, play the fifth of the chord. Let's get that in tune. Okay, let's put the root and the fifth together. Get that in tune. Now, everybody else, play their note and make sure it fits in. And what happens is the third of the chord always sends to me, to my ear, tends to be a little bit sharp. And so I have this pull the pitch down a little bit and bring the third, and all of a sudden that chord just rings. I was in a cinder block room for those 34 years. And if we did it right, the room rang. It's like the cinder blocks rejoiced. And but we would stop anytime there was a cadence. We would stop and do that root, then fifth, then root and fifth, then drop the third in. And so we would play the piece, and I'd say, we're going to stop at each of those places and make sure it's in tune. We'd start the piece and we get to the first island of intonation, make sure it was in tune, going on till we got to the second island of intonation, make sure that was in tune, going on. So it gave them reference points to listen. And little by little, the third of the chord came into, and that's where your second and third players are. They're playing the third of the chord. They're not playing the root. They're not playing the melody.
And for people who
So,
don't know, there is a device by Yamaha called the Harmony Director, which I
yes,
know a ton of people use now. But if people haven't heard of it, you can put it on a setting where all the notes are in tune with each other rather than being just in tune with themselves. So that's a great way to do it these days as well.
yes,
I remember overprogramming when I was younger, and I'm not saying it never happens at this point because we all make mistakes, but you're number four. This is a very challenging piece, quote unquote, right? That's usually code for
yes.
back it off a little bit. They're
Back
not
it off.
they're not quite
Overprogrammed.
ready.
Overprogrammed. Yes, and it's a challenge when you're picking literature because there are more advanced students in your band and you want to challenge them and keep them interested. But there are also the kids who are struggling to keep up, and you need for them to feel success. I was telling you about the girl who was jumping up and down, and she said, "This is the first time first concert I've played where I can play all my notes."
Mhm.
And I think that's important. So I used to strike balance by choosing literature that was just a hair above the middle level of the band. The more advanced players were challenged because there are often solos for those parts. They were challenged to be consistent day after day after day. They were challenged to mentor some, get your music and go sit with the third clarinets today and play their part and help them feel confident in their part. Take your instrument and go sit with the third trombone and play along so that they feel more confident, so that you can challenge those advanced players other ways so that they're still maintaining interest, and then they feel good when those kids that they mentored succeed.
Yeah, some people call that teaching to the middle 80%, right? And
Yes,
then like whatever the middle 80% is plus a little bit because they're going to grow into the program, but
yes,
it's very easy to overshoot that and then say, "Oh, I really like this piece. I think we can do it." Well, five of your kids could do it. but you need
Yes,
the whole band to do it.
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and the other thing is, I always bought the Farmer's Almanac because our assessment was in March. And I always wanted to see how many snow days to expect. And if we were going to have a lot of snow in January and February, that grade 3 band was not going to try that grade 4 piece this year.
Yeah.
You know, you have to take all things into account.
That is veteran wisdom right there. I love that. They still make the Farmer's Almanac.
Yes, they do.
So
It's at the grocery store.
I love that. We've got a few left. The style of the music is not consistently communicated by all the members of the ensemble.
That's mostly articulations. We spend a lot of time on the beginning of the note. We need to spend more time on the middle of the note and especially on the end of the note, on the releases. And if you're not articulating together, or you hear some slurs and some tongues, and you hear some people who are tapering a release and some people who are clipping a release, and it has to be consistent. And you have to address, you almost have to address every note until the kids start to catch on. But listening, and that's part of it, is your ears have to be so finely tuned that you hear this in rehearsal and can deal with it. I was lucky. My first husband was in the Army band at the nation's capital, and I was going to Army band concerts 3 nights a week in the summer, and my ears were getting retuned so that when fall came and school started, I knew what I was listening for. If all you're hearing is your middle school bands day after day after day, you've developed middle school ears, and you need to get professional recordings going so that your ears come back and you can diagnose all those little things. That way, you're going to hear the inconsistencies and be able to correct them before the performance.
Wonderful words of advice. The parts are not being played in the correct proportion. Are we talking about balance?
We are talking about balance and proportion. Balance, yes, but even more than that. I have an analogy that I give. Band is like a chocolate chip cookie. And if I put in 2 cups of chocolate chips and 2 cups of flour and 2 cups of sugar and 2 cups of eggs and 2 cups of vanilla and 2 cups of salt, and I mix it all up together, what are my chocolate chip cookies going to taste like? Salt and vanilla, right? Because that's way too much proportionately to the 2 cups of chocolate chips. The chocolate chips are the melody. We always need to hear the melody. I used to say, yield to the melody. I used to have the percussionists sing the melody so they knew who they were accompanying. Chocolate chips are the melody. The flour, the sugar, the eggs, that's the dough. The salt and the vanilla are there to add warmth but we don't need to taste them all the time. So I would look at the kids and I would shake the salt shaker, and they'd know that their part was less important, not unimportant, just less important.
Right.
So if you've got da 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 da, after 1 or 2 measures of that, we really only just need to see that they're still playing. We don't need to hear it so much. So they become salt. They were a dough, but now they've become salt. It's a matter of understanding what your role is. Are you the melody? Are you rhythmic static accompaniment? Are you the bass line? Are you the counter melody? And putting it all in proportion. So it's even more than balance.
The last one you have here, I have a question about because it says vertical alignment is not precise. The question I have, kind of follow up, is how do you balance the making things in time and vertical versus the horizontal line? Like which one's more important when, and how do you balance those?
Well, let me address the precision. Once kids know how the piece goes, they stop counting. That must not happen. They must continue to count and divide so that vertical precision exists. Once vertical precision is existing because they're going 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, then we come to the horizontal versus the vertical. I attended a clinic with the Army Band years and years ago, and somebody said there are really only 2 kinds of music. There's horizontal and there's vertical. Horizontal, of course, being and vertical being. And then a second clinic several years later said there are really only 2 kinds of music. Anybody know what they are? And I thought, I know what they are. And the person said, there's song and there's dance. And I thought, Okay, I can relate to that. All right. Then I was at a third clinic and they said there are really only two kinds of music. And I thought, whoa, I've got this one. I've got two answers. There are love songs and there are pirate songs.
Mhm.
And that's the one that kids relate to. And I would say, is this a love song or a pirate song? Or is this a song or a dance? And it would help them understand a style. Style is so hard to teach, but it would help them understand stylistically what they were doing while they were counting and making sure that everything was together.
Well, Sally, thanks so much for spending the time with us. I
You're
appreciate it very
welcome.
much. I know we covered the pursuit of excellence, a small part of it today. I know you have some other books as well. Just wanted to kind of highlight those for people.
Okay. Pursuit of Perfection, I didn't name these books, the publisher did, is actually once you get to about 8 or 10 years and you're looking around, you go, yeah, I've got this, but what's next? Well, this is ideas of what's next. This is things that I realized I hadn't said. And it's got a big section on travel and a checklist for domestic and international travel, if you're interested in that. And then my husband and I were asked to write a book um, on it. There's a series of books. It's brass, woodwinds, percussion, and strings. It's repair techniques for band directors, and it's done with bullets and pictures. And for example, this is a picture of an exploded French horn with all the parts labeled. There's one of those for each instrument. And we found out that our folks could say, gee, I need a rotor stop arm screw for a Holton 179. And you could go to the repair shop and get the screw and not have to put your instrument in the shop for 2 weeks. So that's I think a really helpful series to just have on your shelf. It's hard to have online, although they are available online. It's hard to have online because you have to thumb through it. And there's a chapter on each instrument, and anyway.
That's wonderful. People should check those out for sure. So again, thanks so much, Sally, for spending the time with us today. Is there maybe a piece of music or a composer that you want to promote, maybe that people don't do that maybe more should?
I always loved the music of Percy Grainger, and there are things at all levels that he has written. And I think it's Michael Sweeney who's been writing some of the Grainger for grade 2 and grade 3, and just the harmonies, the fact that different lines are doing different things dynamically is a real challenge for some of the kids because they've always done dynamics together. Everybody crescendos. Now this way, the woodwinds crescendo and the brass diminuendo. So it's challenging in that way. But I always program whenever I could program, and whenever I could meant that the band had the right sound, because there's a specific sound in my head for Grainger, and not my bands didn't always have that sound, and so I saved it for the years when it did.
Could you describe that sound?
It's very, I think the parts are more independent. I think Grainger wrote colors in the different instruments, and instead of a homogenized blended sound, it was more, the instrument sounds were more distinct. Does that make sense?
Totally does.
Okay.
Yeah. Sally, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
We sincerely appreciate you taking your valuable time and listening to the Growing Band Director podcast. Your students are very lucky to have a band director like you. If you have any suggestions for episode topics or think you have an area of expertise to share on a show with us, please reach out. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to help spread the word, please give us a 5-star review and tell your band director friends to subscribe as well. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, our YouTube channel, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for listening to The Growing Band Director. See you next week.